The project is called Après le déluge, which is a French idiom used by people who choose to live in the present, not caring about the impact they can have on the future. Climatic instability is causing precipitation anomalies globally, which is leading to a rapid increase in the number of recorded floods worldwide. And the reason it's raining more in some regions of the world is due to a balancing game. The amount of water being constant, some regions get drier while others get wetter. And one of the regions getting wetter is the UK. In the last 10 years, 14% of new housing was built on high-risk flood zones. As Bruno Latour asks, how do we occupy a land if it is this land itself that is occupying us, fighting back? Inhabitants of floodplains need to embrace the unpredictable, see it as an opportunity to reinvent their lifestyles. By adapting floodplain houses to flooding, residents will be able to remain in their hometowns. In 2019, more rivers burst their banks than ever before, most of them located in the center of the country. Flood-vulnerable locations are often occupied by the less wealthy members of society who are forced to evacuate and relocate because the towns they live in have little to no budget to prevent flooding. Currently, 5 million Brits live in flood-prone areas, and they are becoming the UK's first climate refugees. In 2019, Yorkshire and the Humber was the region most dramatically touched by bursting rivers and the resulting floods. This is the Don Valley in South Yorkshire, where the largest city is Sheffield. The River Don burst its banks in 2019, and most of the towns in the valley were flooded. In the 20th century, South Yorkshire was one of the most important regions for coal mining and metallurgy in the UK, leaving the region polluted and its biodiversity slashed. Sheffield sits on the River Don, but the 2019 floods had much worse impact in the smaller towns and villages on the river than Sheffield. This is because Sheffield is central to the region's economy, and therefore its flood defense budget is much larger. The water is essentially diverted from Sheffield, but in reverse, it affects smaller and poorer towns much worse than if there were actually no flood defenses anywhere. The project aims to restore the region's ecology while adapting floodplain housing typology. Local authorities adapt infrastructure to frequent flooding. The state implements natural flood management strategies. Building materials can be sourced from this strategy and are used to adapt the houses on floodplains. Nationwide policy is implemented through the National Planning Policy Framework, a guidebook used by specific regional councils, such as South Yorkshire. Natural flood management in South Yorkshire takes the form of woodland and strategic points of the valley, as well as introducing leaky barriers and reed beds. Catchment woodland ensures that groundwater is absorbed upstream by plants and leaky barriers slow down erosion, while downstream this is done by reed beds and wet woodlands. Natural flood management is an approach to flood management that includes the restoration of habitat of local fauna in a region so damaged by industry. Thatch is made from reeds, which are a byproduct of the floodplain, and reeds give us the opportunity to see the floodplain as a productive land. It is a way of adapting positively to floods. I first tested the idea of an adaptive typology by designing a hybrid between a greenhouse and a domestic space, raised on stilts above the floodplain, where the greenhouse walls are made of polycarbonate, and the alluvium left behind by floods fertilizes the soil and enables a new type of floodplain agriculture to emerge, growing water reeds. Reeds can be used as insulation and roofing materials for the domestic area. The project focuses on Fish Lake, one of the towns worst affected by the November 2019 floods. It is home to 700 people who live in around 200 houses. Fish Lake is what is called a flood ghetto. Floodplain land is some of the cheapest to developers who build cheap and in no way differently than they would anywhere else. This means that the residents of Fish Lake live in houses completely inappropriate for their environment. In the 18th century, straightening and draining works on the river were done to free more land for agriculture, and this actually worsened the already existing flooding in Fish Lake. Dikes and drains were dug, but they are not sufficient anymore. During floods, the ground plane and public space is covered in water. Transportation shifts from cars to boats, but the pedestrian public space is not usable. The original landscape on the left is transformed so as to be ready to hold more water than it currently can by widening the riverbed and restoring the marshy area, as you can see on the right. Willow spilling is a low-tech method used to stabilize rapidly eroding riverbanks, and it also ensures that a pedestrian ground plane continues to exist when the land floods. The adaptation of electrical access boxes from flooding is a crucial part of living on the floodplain. Because when access boxes get flooded, the electricity has to be cut off from the whole town, leaving it in the dark for hours. A proposal is presented to the local authority so as to adapt infrastructure. The new design is placed on top of the existing access boxes in the town. It is a 2-meter-high metal cylinder with a watertight door that can be opened to access the pipes below. The new structure becomes a landmark of floodplains, a public object similar to the phone box or the post box, which are them designed from classical columns. But the new design is inspired from the buttercross, which is a stone structure in Fish Lake that used to indicate the marketplace in other English medieval towns. Because it contains life jackets and an emergency location number, it needs to be visible from far away. Adapting existing houses on floodplains is a shift from the approach humans have had to floods. Flood barriers that we use today are used to fight nature. We need to adapt and let the water flow. The houses in the town are adapted by adding prostheses that are elevated above the floodwaters. Adaptation enables the people of Fish Lake to continue living in their house. Adaptation proposals are presented to the Fish Lake Homeowners Association, and it's an incentive encouraged by the state that facilitates loans, insurance policies, as well as offering grants. The house I chose to test this on is Outwin House on Main Street. Highlighted here on the southern edge of the town, closest to the river and therefore one of the first to floods. In 2019, the floods reached a height of 1.2 meters and stayed for 3 days. All the ground floor rooms were flooded, and the engineering rule of thumb is that, for structural reasons, if a house floods higher than 50 centimeters, the residents should not attempt to flood-proof it. Therefore, floodwaters should be allowed to flow inside the ground floor. This means that the prosthesis needs to contain a kitchen, toilet, lounge, and living dining room. The adapted house and the prosthesis are one overall design, elevated above the water so as to be able to function in times of floods. The adapted house is raised above the existing ground floor with the help of stilts, moving the whole house on the first floor. Only the original brick wall remains on the ground floor, with added columns where needed. A new electrical access box is added in the front yard, along with a pontoon for boat access. The free ground floor space becomes an extension of the garden, fertilized by the alluvium left behind by floods. Garden centers in the region encourage homeowners to adapt their gardening habit to flooding, planting species that thrive in wet environments, and changing impermeable materials to permeable ones to let the water flow inside the ground. Through natural flood management and the freeing of the ground, the project enables biodiversity to return to the region. The first floor is split into 2 spaces, the living space in the prosthesis, and 2 steps up in the original brick house, the bedroom and bathroom space. The wall of the prosthesis are made of polycarbonate, and the original brick facade is whitewashed. The steps separate the old from the new and keeps the feeling of a house. Some of the materials used to adapt the house are byproducts of the natural flood management, like hazel coppice and clay used to make wattle and daub walls, or reed panels which can be used to insulate the house. The original roof is removed and replaced by a thatched roof. This new building guidebook can be applied to all the buildings in the village, including community spaces like pubs, which enable the residents to continue meeting even in times of floods. Flooding is seen as a catastrophic event because we try to resist nature by resisting the water. Adaptive design gives us the opportunity to live with climatic instability in a symbiotic way.